So, are you John D. Rockefeller? It's the beginning of the 20th century, 1911. You control 90% of the oil refineries in the United States. You definitely conquered capitalism with your relentless monopoly, crushing competitors without mercy to become the true oil tycoon. That same year, the Supreme Court broke up your Standard Oil empire into 34 companies. You were never this rich. Your fortune reached the peak of $900 million. That amount is so astronomical that, adjusted for today, you would have to combine Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates to match your fortune. But now that you've secured wealth for the next 70 generations or more of your family, your mind finally opens up to bigger problems. Because despite accumulating mountains of dollars, you still wanted something more ambitious, to shape society itself. And the most efficient mechanism you found for that was also the most likable: philanthropy. You start donating your fortune. And from then on, everything people would do, study, work, take care of their own health, would go through the system you built yourself. This system will shape schools, hospitals, governments, and even the minds of people who will live centuries after your death. So that's how the Rockefeller Matrix was created, and to this day, millions try to escape. At the start of the 20th century, Rockefeller had a poor public image. His secret cartels, manipulation of suppliers, and other questionable practices that destroyed his competitors caused hatred all across the country. People may hate the billionaire, but they can't hate someone who donates money. He began donating his fortune and founded the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. In the eyes of the public, he stopped being the cruel oil baron and became the great benefactor of humanity through charity. But his donations weren't impartial. By funding universities, research, and hospitals, he wasn't just giving money. Rockefeller was also setting the direction of these institutions. Whoever pays calls the tune, and he knew exactly what he wanted to play. The primary focus was education and health, because controlling what people learn and how they take care of themselves is controlling society itself. So the first gear of this plan was in the classroom. In the early 1900s, the United States educational system was still decentralized. Many rural schools taught in a community-based way, with varied curricula. That didn't work for Rockefeller. The words of the mayor of New York, John Helan, better demonstrate what the atmosphere was like at the time.
The real threat to our republic is the invisible government, which, like a giant octopus, extends its sticky legs over our cities, states, and nation. To avoid mere generalizations, let me say that leading these people are the interests of Rockefeller, Standard Oil, and a small group of powerful banking houses, usually called international bankers. The small group of powerful international bankers practically runs the government of the United States for their own selfish purposes. They control most of the newspapers and magazines in this country. They use the columns of these newspapers to subdue or remove public officials who do not follow their interests.
So through his foundation, Rockefeller funded reforms that standardized education. Sponsored reports advocated for a school that produced obedient workers, not critical thinkers. Rows of desks, bells, repetitive curricula, all inspired by the logic of factories. And this whole plan was pronounced with a beautiful sincerity. This document, written by Frederick Gates for the General Education Board, an American philanthropic foundation created in 1902 by none other than John G. Rockefeller, said the following:
"In our dreams, we have unlimited resources and people submit themselves with total obedience to our guidance. The current educational conventions of moral and intellectual education disappear from our minds, and, free from tradition, we will expand our goodwill over a grateful and receptive mass. We do not want to make these people, or any of their descendants, philosophers or men of knowledge, nor men of science. We do not intend to bring forth among them authors, educators, poets, or learned men. We are not going to look for embryos of great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, of whom we have a wide supply. The task we set ourselves is very simple. We will organize our children and teach them to do perfectly the things their parents are doing imperfectly.
So Rockefeller didn't want philosophers, he wanted human cogs for the industrial machine. And by funding universities and boards of education, he ensured that this model would spread. Now, so-called education would become repetitive teaching of loose information simply to pass a test. So, this school architecture didn't come about by chance, it was designed. Think for a moment. Do you really believe that the 12 mandatory years we spend in school, basically doing memorization exercises, will make someone truly wise blossom? It's no wonder that our society is made up of a large number of functional illiterates who can't interpret a text. The system was intentionally built to produce many functional illiterates. No real intellectual development, just mechanized teaching to create cogs that would keep the system running, with the elites at the top and a mass with almost zero chance of social mobility. Today, you don't get to choose whether you can homeschool your child. Homeschooling is completely forbidden.
There's a mother who is being prosecuted and fined 100,000 reais for keeping her son studying at home.
To avoid becoming a criminal, a father is currently forced to enroll his child in a mandatory educational system that teaches everything except independent thinking and free initiative. In the end, it will probably be just another person calmly waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And who believes everything the government says and everything that's in the media? Respected educators see that school has actually become a mechanism of alienation and brainwashing to keep the world as it is. In other words, the system that favors only the interests of the corporate and political elites has prevailed. But Rockefeller's ambition didn't stop there. He also wanted to control how people dealt with their own bodies. The next target was medicine. Until then, colleges taught various practices: phytotherapy, naturopathy, homeopathy. The use of natural medicines was common. This decentralized ecosystem was unpredictable. Rockefeller needed a standard. So, in 1910, he funded the famous Flexner Report in partnership with Carnegie. A man named Abraham Flexner traveled across the United States to inform him about how medicine and hospitals worked throughout the country. The compilation of information and the recommendations contained in the Flexner Report resulted in the medical model we have today. Medical schools and hospitals were required to adopt the recommendations set forth there. The result, hundreds of medical schools were closed. What remained were institutions shaped by Rockefeller, teaching a medicine centered on the use of patented drugs. And here's a detail. At the time, Flexner advocated for the closure of all historically black medical colleges. At that time, his racism was so blatant that he even stated in his report that a well-trained black public health worker would be immensely useful, while a black person with a medical degree is dangerous. But why? Why was Rockefeller so interested in shaping medicine? Rockefeller didn't want to miss the opportunity to get into the emerging pharmaceutical industry, which years later would be making $1.48 trillion in 2020. So he used his oil fortune, all in the name of charity of course, to fund chemical research. Companies connected to his network began turning petroleum derivatives into synthetic medicines. The scientists received large donations to study how plants cured diseases, but the real goal was to understand and identify which chemical elements in the plant were effective, and then to recreate in the lab a similar but not identical chemical product that could be patented. In this scenario, Rockefeller saw the opportunity to monopolize oil, chemistry, and the medical industry at the same time, and with a new and huge advantage. Creating patents for the new products would be able to generate even greater profits. After all, oil has always been just a commodity. Through his high level of influence, Rockefeller, his family, and his top executives, with their monopolistic alliances, were connected to the largest chemical cartel in history, the feared IG Farben, one of the industrial engines of the Nazi regime. From this partnership, which began in 1929, a scandal emerged in which Standard Oil, in addition to helping finance the Nazi regime, also denied, or at least delayed, revealing the Germans' industrial secret of producing synthetic rubber, something that would put the United States at tremendous risk by depending on a vital input for its airplanes, automobiles, and war equipment in general, which needed rubber. This would later be viewed as a major betrayal of the country. However, a 1942 legal agreement during the conflict ended it with symbolic fines, loss of patents, and some executives testifying before Congress. With the end of the war, IG Farben was broken up into three giants. But there was a problem. With the dissolution of the headquarters, some assets would end up in the United States, and it was Standard Oil that created the perfect cover, America IG, a conglomerate that absorbed a network of chemical and pharmaceutical companies like Sterling Drug, Monsanto, and Dow. A perfect cycle was created. The Rockefeller Foundation funded medical schools, training generations of doctors to prescribe chemical drugs. And who produced these drugs? The same pharmaceutical cartel in which they had a stake. The result was another silent monopoly, a cartel that not only enriched the Rockefellers, but also shaped modern medicine and the very pharmaceutical industry we know today. To the public, it seemed like progress. Medicine became more professional. Antibiotics, vaccines, and anesthesia truly saved millions of lives. But behind the scenes, Rockefeller had created a structure where Big Pharma was just another tool for generating profit. Everyone believed medicine was neutral and scientific progress had no hidden agendas. But deep down, both were ultimately serving private interests. Thus, medicine served both to generate profits and to keep the population healthy enough to continue producing and consuming in a never-ending cycle. Nutrition and prevention became footnotes, and patients turned into lifelong clients. Alternative therapies were completely marginalized and labeled as quackery. Nowadays, people look at you like you're a weirdo if you talk about the healing properties of plants or any other practices that don't focus only on the disease or symptoms. Doctors who take a path outside the consensus have been and remain crucified. And so that no one would notice this trick, Rockefeller also needed to control one more thing. Rockefeller knew that science doesn't exist without funding and that journalism doesn't exist without advertising, so he did both. By sponsoring research institutes, he determined which scientific lines had a future and which ones were discarded. By investing in newspapers and magazines via the pharmaceutical cartel, he controlled published content. Criticism of the pharmaceutical model was silenced, and alternative therapies were ridiculed as quackery. The public believed they were following what science said, but in practice, they were only following what the Rockefeller network of foundations and companies allowed to circulate, since their foundation agents were already infiltrated in the Associated Press, and also because Rockefeller had already gotten the tycoon William Randolph Hearst, owner of dozens of newspapers, in his pocket, after his bank saved him from bankruptcy in 1930, after the Great Depression of '29. If there was one thing Rockefeller knew how to play, it was monopoly. and the life lessons he learned building Standard Oil proved to be a valuable resource for control. Then, general education, medical education, the pharmaceutical industry, the regulators, and the media, because all of them were on some level linked to his new web of monopoly, formed through so-called charity. Rockefeller died in 1937, but the system he built continued. Modern schools still function like assembly lines for obedience. Medicine still revolves around pharmaceutical protocols, and the media still depends on advertisers who define what can or cannot be published. All of this feels natural, as if it has always been this way. And that was his greatest achievement, not just creating wealth, but normalizing a model of the world. People may not even remember his name, but when they enter a school, a pharmacy, or a hospital, they're inside the universe he helped design.